Welcome to Hope at Home this Wednesday night. I'm Pastor Joel White-Hugheim.
And I'm Pastor Kaitlyn Forrester.
And thank you so much for taking this time this evening to be with us if you're watching live. And if you're not watching live, thanks for taking this time whenever you are. And just know this is a great opportunity for you to just take a break, to take a deep breath or several dozen deep breaths, and just center yourself. Feel free to breathe in the Holy Spirit and to exhale whatever you're carrying with you today. Just know that if you had a great day, you can give thanks to God for all that went well. If you had a pretty forgettable day or some stuff happened that you weren't terribly thrilled about, or you're just having a hard time, just know both you're not alone, and that this can be a time at least to have a break from that, and just know that if you're feeling kind of out of your rhythm, out of your routine, or just kind of feel like there's something missing in life, again, you're not alone. Each one of us is in an odd place where we've experienced kind of significant loss, and are in places where we're trying to find our routine. And so hopefully these Wednesdays together for Hope at Home can be part of your routine. And so as we start, Pastor Kaitlyn, I think you've got something to help center us and then also lead into our very interesting guest tonight.
All right, thank you. Yes, I'm going to start with a scripture passage and then give you a little devotion afterwards. So I invite you to breathe deeply as you're listening into this. Take some deep breaths, get comfortable, maybe feel what's happening in your body. So these are the words from Luke 8. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. Just then there was a man named Jairus, a leader of the synagogue. He fell at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, who was dying. As he went, the crowds pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. And though she had spent all she had on physicians, no one could cure her. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his clothes, and immediately her hemorrhage stopped. Then Jesus asked, "Who touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds surround you and press in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I noticed that power had gone out from me." When the woman saw that she could not remain hidden, she came trembling and fell down before him. She declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had immediately been healed. Jesus said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." And these are really lovely words of Jesus's. They're part of his teaching. And the reason we chose this for tonight is that the power and healing of touch feels really important. And maybe it's something you're missing. I know it's something that I'm missing in these days, whether it's a hug, a handshake, or a shoulder rub type thing. Touch is something that connects us to one another. And it's really hard to go into spaces where you wonder, is this something I can or cannot do in these days? But I also thought about this about the way we experience touch within our own bodies. How many of you are listening to your body, especially in these days where we might be stressed or anxious about something else? Our bodies have a way of holding our feelings and our emotions. So for instance, I know that when I get stressed, I carry it in my shoulders and feel that release when the stress goes away. And so I wonder if this story is also asking us to be aware of what's happening in our bodies, in our limbs. And maybe we too can metaphorically reach out and touch the fringe of Jesus's cloak. Fringes in those day and age represented the laws and the commandments. That was the purpose on a rabbi's cloak. But touching the fringe today may look or feel like getting in touch with our bodies, our actions, and recognizing where God's presence may be in them. So think about, how do you love your body and yourself? How do you love others? How do you work through the pain of whatever circumstance may be present, or to feel the release of a joyful moment? And maybe when we do so, we too can hear those words, "Your faith has made you well. Go in peace."
Thank you so much, Pastor Kaitlyn, and just some beautiful thoughts to help center us, and to be reminded too of just how important it is that part of our created reality is that we have these bodies. And so that's what we'll be talking about today: faith and our bodies. And our guest tonight is Anna Miller. And Anna is a yoga teacher, and has continued to teach in a new way during the pandemic, which is a fascinating story we may get to, and is also this fall, because in addition to having to adjust to an online yoga reality, has also started her work towards a master's in social work after a very interesting journey and discernment process to get there. So Anna, thanks so much for being here with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So maybe first you can just give us a little more detail, a little more color to your background, and then how did kind of what you'd experienced, what your life was about, how did that lead to an interest in yoga? Kind of how did you get to this point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is my second stint in graduate school. Right after college, I went to graduate school for architectural history. I thought I wanted to be an academic. I pretty quickly figured out that was not for me. So I did finish a PhD in architectural history and did freelance writing and editing. In the meantime, I had done a yoga teacher training program in part to procrastinate writing my dissertation. And after graduate school, I was writing and editing and teaching yoga, and I wound up putting more and more of my time and energy into the yoga bucket and less into the writing and editing bucket. And a few years ago, I realized, yeah, this is really feeding me in a way I hadn't realized. And I was lucky enough to be able to readjust my schedule, teach more, write less. I've really enjoyed it. I took my first yoga class when I was in college and hated it. I was dealing with a lot of anxiety at the time, and being asked to breathe deeply in a not terribly supportive space was just triggering for me. But a few years later, I tried a different yoga class in a different studio with a different teacher, and it clicked. It was right what I needed. It was exactly what I needed right then. For a few years, I was kind of on and off with yoga. And then I realized I needed it to be a consistent part of my life. Mm-hmm. So I've been practicing it consistently for 8 or 9 years now. And I did my yoga teacher training, which is a pretty intensive process. It's the rough equivalent of a year of school. Like if you were doing it as a graduate school class or something, it would be a year's worth of courses. And I did that in 2013. So I've been teaching since then.
Wow.
I've got a question. So I know yoga comes in many forms and many varieties. Mm-hmm. What about it resonates for you? Like, what was that draw that was pulling you to like have it be that self-care practice that was filling your bucket in those moments?
That's a great question. For me, I think a big part of it is I grew up dancing. I grew up doing a lot of ballet and then some modern and jazz. And I loved being in my body in that way, but I didn't love the performance aspect of it. When I discovered yoga, or when yoga discovered me, the type of yoga I was doing was very physical. And it felt familiar. I got to use my body in some familiar ways, and I got to reconnect with it in a way I hadn't since I'd stopped dancing. And it was about serving myself on an internal level and connecting in community instead of performing. so that was just a really good fit for me.
Yeah.
So what do you think it is about yoga that helps you feel that sort of connection to your body? Because I think it was really interesting how you described that internal care that you were experiencing, but then also you, as you were telling your story, you talked about the safe space that you finally found. And so I hear both this internal and external part of your embodiment. And so, what's that mean for you, or what's that feel like, I guess?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a nicely wrapped up answer to that, but there are a couple of pieces of it for me. One is that I have noticed that a lot of the yoga communities I've been in have been places that attract seekers, people who are looking for something more in their life. And by nature of that, they're making themselves vulnerable in a way that can be mutually supportive. There's an openness that's similar to what I find, walking into Lord of Life for service, that you might not have in a different kind of space, that you're probably not going to have walking into a coffee shop or sometimes a classroom for that matter. So there's that particular quality of community, and the idea that we're all here to find something and maybe we can find it together. The other thing that I thought of when you asked your question is something that people in the yoga world sometimes call the subtle body. And so the idea that we have a physical body, we have a growth body, we have our arms and legs and these things that we can move through space. And some yoga practices involve a lot of physical movement. But the idea eventually is to get at the deep inside stuff that is neither mind nor body. It's the thing in between. And maybe it's something like soul. But the idea is that either through movement or through quiet, we can access that layer of ourselves that we can't touch or smell, but we know is there. And we can come into contact with it in a way that we're often not able to when we're being busy humans out in the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds almost that when it's beyond our sensory experience. I mean, there's what I'm hearing and what you're saying is even some sort of sense of transcendence in what in when you're kind of beyond those sensory realities. So kind of related to that, as someone who sees other people and leads other people in yoga practices and is seeking to educate through it all. I mean, what's your sense about how our bodies are impacted by what we experience in life? I mean, how do our bodies take on what's going on in our daily life? What have you seen, and how do you help people respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pastor Kaitlyn hit the nail on the head when she talked about our bodies holding our experiences. And, you'll notice even outside of a yoga classroom, you don't have to be a yoga teacher to notice that sometimes we can read what's going on with someone through their body, through their posture. Mm-hmm. Often someone who's hurting is in a posture that's protective and closed off of their heart. People who are either very confident or trying to project confidence often walk around with their chest puffed out. There's this openness and this moving forward through space in a particular way. So we can see that. But I think especially if we're talking about trauma, and this can be big T trauma, like, you've been in a car accident or you've lost someone dear to you, or it can be little T trauma. It can be our day-to-day frustrations and the logistics of living life. Those big T and little T traumas, I think, especially show up in our bodies. And recent research has actually shown that if we don't deal with those things, if we don't deal with the physical manifestations of trauma, we're not going to be able to think our way out of it. We can't, we could do endless talk therapy, but if we don't also deal with how those hurts and those pains are embodied, we won't fully heal.
Yeah.
And I've heard that in the last 6 or 7 months, so during this pandemic, that all of us have experienced trauma, big T or little t. And what's unique about this time is that we've all experienced it to some extent, and some of us may be more aware of it than others, or it might just be roiling underneath. But what have you seen in people, in their lives, in their bodies, and how do you try to coach them, lead them, connect them through this weird space that we're in?
Yeah, I have seen, just in terms of who's showing up to class, I think we tend to have a kind of bipolar reaction to, if we're stressed out, some of us really want to be in community more. And so we'll show up more consistently. Maybe we'll show up a little earlier than we used to because we want to say hello to other people on the Zoom call before class begins. So I'll see some of that. I'll also see some people who kind of drop off, they disappear for a little bit because they're just hurting so badly. They think they don't want to be seen. We want to be seen, like, you get me, you see me, but getting through that more superficial layer of, oh my gosh, you see me, can be hard for people. In terms of what I'm seeing in people's bodies, I mean, I am hearing more than ever, oh my goodness, my neck hurts so bad today, my shoulders. I'm with you, Pastor Kaitlyn. I do this all the time when I am stressed out. So I'm hearing just a lot of my shoulders, my neck, and my lower back. People are showing up with pain and stiffness in their body. That's both because of this trauma. I think it's also because we are doing all of our work on screens now. So we're like sticking our faces out in front of us. Just on a practical level, our posture has been impacted for the worse by this. So yeah, people are showing up with different kinds of aches and pains. And then kind of like what I was saying with people wanting to connect with other people more or less, I'm noticing some folks are having a shift in that they're craving like a more vigorous movement than they used to. They want to move faster and fiercer. I think for some of us, I'm one of those people like that gets me out of my head if my body's really working. Other people want something more mellow and slow and calming because they know that for them, inviting their body to be quiet will help quiet their mind.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I know. I carry right here in my jaw. That's a real manifestation. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting about the Shavasana part of the practice. So for those who've taken yoga, if you want to explain a little bit more about the intentional part of Shavasana in yoga practices.
So the last pose that we do in many yoga classes, in Sanskrit, we say Shavasana, and it's translated typically to corpse pose. So it's a symbolic death. At the end of our yoga practice, it's a complete rest and release. Complete, as in like death. Now things get a little tricky here because yoga was largely imported from India and has been filtered through a lot of, white Western lenses. So if we bracket that, we can talk about that another time. What my teachers have explained is, we have this symbolic death at the end of each yoga class to practice. Like, that's life. Life is death. It's dealing with loss. And we also have an opportunity immediately after each practice for a symbolic rebirth. And you can see that physically in a yoga space often. Classes that end in Shavasana, lying on our backs, really letting go of even like any conscious breath work we've been doing, are followed by us rolling to one side and curling up in a ball and coming into the fetal position before we come back again. So it's really powerful. It can be scary for students to hear at first that they're doing corpse pose. It's a pose that it's my hardest pose. I'm still working on it. I don't know how to let go.
what was I mean, even as you were describing what that pose is like, I mean, just what I experienced in myself, imagining it was relaxing. I don't know if that says I'm attuned to a corpse pose, but there is something about, and I mean, earlier you were mentioning that idea of vulnerability, because that maybe, I wonder how many people that is their hang up for yoga. Like, I'm not going to do it right, or I'm going to be that, it's going to be clear I'm an imposter, or I don't really belong here. But just as I was thinking through what it would feel like, it felt freeing, which I think might be part of the point.
That's exactly the point.
Yeah. So, you're talking about, and we don't have the time certainly to get into all of both the history and then the takeover of yoga and all of those things. There are some people that think, well, I've worked in places where people say, well, it's not Christian. It's like, well, that kind of depends on where you're coming at it from. But how, with your focus on our bodies and kind of how, I mean, what I hear and what you're saying is, how is God helping us connect with who we're created to be in this practice then? Because we don't, I mean, as much as you love your students, they don't live in the studio, they have lives to lead. Right. So it's a practice to help any of us in being faithful in our lives. So how do you see some of those connections between those our bodily realities of what you see in yoga, and then living out our faith in our daily lives?
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of a trauma researcher who has a fascinating book. So the trauma researcher's name is Bessel van der Kolk. He's a psychiatrist and he researches trauma. He has this fabulous book, The Body Keeps the Score. And he says, whenever we're trying to kind of work through or heal from trauma, again, little to big, we can't get to the why question until we understand the what. And for him, we understand the what by tuning into our bodies. Again, maybe on that deep level. Maybe it's like noticing, wow, my shoulders are really tense today. What's going on? But maybe it's something deeper. Maybe it's that you just notice something feels a little off, and that's a signal that there's work to be done. And I think that's one thing that many of us take from yoga. And to me, that's wisdom that's coming from somewhere beyond us. That's God helping us understand. God gave us our bodies. He gave us these bodies that can do fabulous things for us, for many of us who are able-bodied. And I think God also gave us our bodies as another way to know ourselves and to know other people, right? You were talking about the importance of touch, Pastor Kaitlyn. It's a way to connect with other people, but it's also a way to connect to ourselves. If we learn to read our bodies, we can read ourselves and thus, what God has planned for us a bit more. We can also learn how to, learn how to do some of that work that we learn on an intellectual level in church. We can learn how to act that out in our lives if we can translate it from mind to body.
Yeah.
Nice. So, how would you, who would you say yoga is for, or and not just kind of everyone, but kind of, how would you drill down even a little more on kind of what some of the benefits are, and why you would say, yeah, this is worth a shot, and this is why I think there's great value in it.
Yeah. I would say yoga's target population is people who feel like they spend a little too much time in their head. Mm-hmm. So either that's because you do a lot of intellectual work, whether that's, for your job, or because you are a thinker and that's how you move through life, or people who are in their head because that's where how their anxiety manifests. like I said, when I was taking my first yoga class in college, I was dealing with a ton of anxiety. I had anxiety, you know, stuff going on for me from when I was really, really young. And for me, that has always felt like my mind spinning. And so I think yoga can be really helpful and powerful in cultivating that quiet mind, and giving you a break from that thinking. And then it's in that quiet, to return to your previous question, that we can connect with God. If we're always moving up here, we don't have any room for God to get in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a beautiful connection.
So, Pastor Kaitlyn, other follow-ups?
Oh, goodness.
The burning question there.
I don't know a burning question. I've just been so like enraptured with this. This is really fascinating.
I think one thing that I'm taking away, so just the idea and the awareness, and, you know, I've noticed that, but what you've said, Anna, really kind of zeroes me in on it, but how much we can read in one another's bodies about kind of how we're doing, how we're really closed, you know, we can tell, and you can see it in the posture. And typically we get enculturated as we get older, so we kind of know how to fake it a little more, but, you know, you see it in kids, particularly because they don't feel the need to hide that, but just how we close off or open up. I gotta admit, we have all these turkeys that live in our neighborhood, and when you're talking about like having chest out, I just thought about the toms that walk around and then try to impress the female turkeys. And I don't know how well they do, but they're clearly very comfortable in their own, well, skin, feathers, it's all in there.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we're all a bunch of turkeys, but there's something in there, I think. So where would people be able to find your practice, or it's like totally underground? And
oh, it is not totally underground. I welcome all comers. Let's see. The best way is probably to email me. So my email address is annadarice@gmail.com. That's my first and middle name. So it's ANNADARICE@gmail.com. That's the best way to get it. I've kept things pretty low, not low tech because we're doing yoga over Zoom, but low overhead. So I don't have a proper website, but yeah, if you contact me, I'm happy to either invite you into my virtual space, or I just know tons of resources, including resources to do yoga for free. So give me a shout if you've got any questions.
Nice. Probably the only yoga teacher around with an architectural history PhD background. So I don't know if that's firmly.
I don't know how big the overlap on the Venn diagram is, but yeah.
Like you don't set your lessons to be about different architectural styles, or like lesson plans named after.
I haven't tried that yet, but we could get there. I like the way you're thinking.
Oh, yeah. Oh man. Like here's the brutalist yoga style, or maybe you don't want to go there.
Yeah, that'd be rough. Yeah.
And the other, the thing that really came to mind for me too, as you're talking about our faith and those connections, and then how every day, part of life is death, and that's part of our Christian story as well. And one of the things, and we confess this in the Apostles' Creed all the time, but I think we say it but don't connect it together, that we believe in the resurrection of the body. So oftentimes we think about just kind of mental, or that we're just spirits that are going to float away. But God promises us this embodied resurrection, which is what the people experienced Jesus after Easter, that there was an embodied reality, and that's part of God's promise. And if you want to do a little Bible study for any of our viewers out there, 1 Corinthians 15 is kind of the fullest treatment of what the resurrection of the body looks like. 1 Corinthians 15, where Paul dives into that, because it's actually something that helps us stay connected. And there's this continuity between what we experience in this life and then what the life beyond this life will be like. And that's not just our thoughts or feelings, but also our bodies. And so I love those connections that you're making in talking about your yoga practice too, because I think it's truly what our Christian faith is about.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Well, good. Anything else, Pastor Kaitlyn or Anna, before we bid adieu tonight?
I think you summed it up great.
Oh, well, I don't know about that, but we're at our time. And if there are any follow-up questions you have, you can post those on our Facebook feed. And again, Anna's contact email is there, so feel free to. Did I get it right? I think
You got it.
Excellent. I would hate for someone who's not you to. I heard a story about someone who had
Get all the emails
at Gmail, and they kept getting email from someone from at Yahoo, and they actually got invited to a Zoom dinner party and kind of wanted to go because they missed people, but they weren't really invited. It was for someone else, and so they were having an ethical fun. Do I show up because I want to be with people, or do I maybe forward it to this other person who I know it was intended for? So, but that's for another hope.
Right.
So. Anyway, well, thanks again for everyone watching at home for giving your time to this, and hopefully you not only learn something, but then also can feel more grounded and more centered in your day. So thanks again, Anna, for your time and for all of your faithful, important work. And thanks, Pastor Kaitlyn, as always, for everything that you do. And take care, everyone.